Hello, hello, welcome. My name's Nicole Glenn. Today we are hosting a great show. Myself and Charlie Saffro are going to be talking to Linda, and we're going to go into the topic of how to handle a PR crisis, as well as talking a little bit about building personal brands with that. So, Linda, we're so excited to have you on our show today. I'm elated to have you here and have you share some experiences with our audience. So, thank
Thank
you for joining us
you. Oh,
today.
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, so I just want to kick this off and say, tell us about you. We want to hear about your background, family. Tell our audience, a little bit about yourself and how you came into this.
Sure, sure. And it's funny, Nicole, because and Charlie, as you know, I'm usually on your side of it, doing the interviews. So I have not been interviewed before, so it's definitely a new experience for me. Um, but I come from a very big family, one of six kids. Grew up in suburbs in Westchester, New York, and then went off to grow up for the latter part of my years in a very small town, Montauk. Families, I think there were like 300 families out there. But I grew up out there. For me, when people say, what are the things that strike you most from growing up or just the values, my parents had an incredibly strong work ethic. And they really, I think all of us, all six of us, have the same thing in one way or another. And I remember when I was 12 years old, my father said, okay, you could go to work now, and start saving money for college if you want to go to college. And I thought, yeah, but he was serious. And I did. I went off to college and studied communications and got my MBA in marketing, and started working. I mean, been working professionally since I was 18 years old. So I spent a good amount of time working at a publishing company, ThomasNet, which was formerly Thomas Register of American Manufacturers. And so that was kind of my landing in manufacturing and supply chain and logistics. I didn't set out to say, gee, I want to do public relations for, logistics. And I know. And in the early days, I thought, oh God, manufacturing, I'm never going to understand this. How am I going to be able to do this job? And today I can't think of any other industry that I'd rather be in. I think it's more exciting today than ever. And I mean that from the heart. So yeah, so just, I'd like to say that I had this very strategic path and I was gonna, like medical school or law school. But I just kind of landed in it and got lucky. And so I help, I've worked with, I did internal communications. I should be clear about that, for Thomas Publishing. And internal meaning it was a small group of us, and our job was to generate, widespread national, international recognition for the company to help drive traffic to the site, to help drive advertisers, to help drive revenue. And then on the same token, really work on the internal side to encourage and build, positive employee morale and be able to deal with problems as they came up, and crisis management, which I know we're going to talk about, which is so important. And so I had the pleasure of working at the time with a lot of different agencies, big agencies, medium-sized agencies, and later boutique ones. And so I discovered along that way that there was this chronic problem that I saw in PR, which was you get dazzled by the senior folks that came in, and then you'd end up working with very junior people, and it would be, because of such high turnover in that industry, it would be repeated. So you're making an investment in this agency. You don't want to have to keep retraining and re-educating their people. And so, at some point I decided, after my daughter was born, that, I wanted to have more control over my time and my schedule. And so I ended up decided to do my own thing. And I said, you know what, I'm going to build a business, or I'm going to build something where I'm going to be the person that people are talking to, and I'm going to understand their business, their challenges, their opportunities, and they can work with a small group of seasoned professionals to get the job done. Which does control how big you get, but it really, I think, helps the quality. So I feel like I've been rambling on about that. I do get excited. So
No, it's great. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the background. It's always inspiring to hear how other female business owners got into this industry. I think we all kind of fell into it, and like you said, couldn't imagine it any other way. So I understand PR, I understand supply chain, logistics, transportation. Tell us what your world looks like when it's all combined. What types of clients are you working with? And when people think of PR, tell us about some of the projects that you generally take on for these clients.
Sure. No, good question. So PR is all about when people ask me what it is, it's, they say, oh, can we do a release or can we do this? It's PR is so much more than that. PR is about establishing who you are, what your brand is. It's your brand. It's who you are. It's what you stand for, especially today, and the things that are important to you and what you produce, and probably most importantly, not so much about your products, but about the problem that you're solving in the marketplace. What are the things that you're doing to address that? And so it's about how do you, knowing your audience. And, I always say whenever I start working with somebody, it's really important. And Nicole, as you know, to have a media landscape and to understand who are the journalists that you want to be talking to, and what are, and also your people, their readership are your prospects, right? You want to be in front of them.
Sure.
But what are the things, where are they getting their news and information? Because that's so critical. Because if they're getting their news and information off of LinkedIn, and they're never looking at a paper, they're never looking at a magazine, then you know where you need to focus efforts. If they're now on the flip side, they may not be on Facebook or Instagram or other areas. And so you have to really recognize where your people are and then tailor your communications to them. And, a good solid PR strategy could just be as simple as, knowing here are the top publications that I want to be in, or the top outlets or influencers, especially influencers today, because, and we can talk about that a little bit more in depth, but who are the folks that I want to be in front of? And then doing it through a combination of pitching and having, really good, strong talking points. So you're creating a product that's solving a challenge, and being able to quantify that challenge, from a financial perspective is really great. And so having your talking points and your pitches ready to go, and talking to reporters and trying to engage them to talk with somebody at one of my clients. And then there's also controlling the narrative, which is submitting editorials, right? And, being the author of articles that talk about the problems or the challenges. And then, being able to submit those and have those get published. That's really, that's a great way to go. But, it could be campaign driven. It could be steady outreach. I remember one of my fondest projects that only because it was a lot of fun. I was working with, so ThomasNet at the time was concerned that the average user was 55 and up. And they were concerned that they weren't attracting enough of younger users to the website. And so we started working with an organization, the Institute of Supply Management, which represents all of the purchasing managers around the country, and it's a prime target for them. And we started working with them as a partner, and their concern was that their members were also aging and they weren't getting younger people in. So we said, well, let's create a program that everybody knows about, like 30 under 30, and let's highlight and shine a spotlight on 30 incredibly talented young people who are making a difference. And so everybody said, yes, that's great, let's do that. And then we just kind of went, but what if there aren't 30 people under 30? It was like one of those, oh. And we did the outreach, and luckily we got, well over 200 nominations in the beginning, which was great.
Amazing. Yeah,
it was fun. And then we got to spotlight these folks and really, get a better understanding of what they were looking at and their challenges and how they viewed the industry. And, it was great information for ThomasNet, for ISM. It shined a spotlight on them. It was something that we did a big hoopla at their conference, and it's a program that still exists today, which I'm so proud of.
Very cool.
So it's continuing to shine that spotlight. And by the way, by shining that spotlight, you're encouraging younger people to come in. And so ThomasNet saw a huge spike in their website traffic as a result of it. which is cool because, in PR, it can be challenging on metrics,
Yeah.
So you want to look at, and that's why it's also really important to define the metrics up front, like we do a metrics dashboard to be able to say, well, what am I going to claim as success? Well, number of interviews, the number of articles, the number of, the amount of site traffic that I'm getting. So identify all those metrics that are important to you in your business up front so that you can look at it and be able to say within a month and 2 months and a year, hey, am I reaching my target? How am I doing?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the hardest things about PR in general is, the quantifying of metrics, and you drive people to your site and PR is a contributor, but obviously there's so many other programs. So how do your clients really hone in on, what KPIs and metrics to look at?
So I have a client who creates e-commerce platforms for manufacturers, and they're looking at articles, same things that we were talking about. At the end of the day, they want to be able to sign on new clients.
Sure.
New business. And there's not that direct link. For that, it's more anecdotal evidence that they know that this article led them to this prospect, and that prospect within 2 months signed on and is now an account of theirs.
Sure.
And so they're able to, that's the holy grail, right? When you're able to get the client. In the meantime, it's all those steps that lead up to it. So it's the interviews, it's the traffic, it's the referring site URLs. So if you're published in a magazine that's important to you, for example, Industry Week, it's important to be able to look at your site traffic. And all of a sudden, if you see a spike in people coming in from that URL, that's a metric. So all of those, number of interviews, the number of speaking engagements, as you get out there, people then start to look at you, and all of a sudden you get calls, right? Nicole, you're getting calls all the time for different people, for podcasts, for interviews, for, a speaking gig or a panel, whatever it might be.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the thing. I don't think that a lot of people fully comprehend PR. So I think when you think of PR and you've never been in it before, I think your mind goes to like famous individuals who just have to clean stuff up, right?
Right.
It's just not thought of how to utilize that in a company's actual corporate strategy.
Right.
To transition from taking your marketing efforts, getting your brand out there with content, but then streamlining that with what you were saying. So can you explain to us, Linda, like, why is it important for companies to contemplate adding a PR effort to their corporate strategy?
It's thank you. That's a great question. It's, good PR and communication goes hand in hand with marketing. And as far as business strategy, if your goal is to double your business in a year, or whatever it may be, you want to look at, well, how am I going to get there? And you could take it down to the granular level of, well, ultimately that's going to mean this many sales calls, or if I want to get this number of clients, I need to make this number of sales calls. I need to make this number of presentations. I need to, whatever the steps are that lead to that sale. And if you back it up and you say, but so you want to make it easier for that salesperson, however you sell, whether it's something, if it's coming directly in, it's a direct to consumer strategy, and it's coming directly in from a website to an order, to a catalog and to an order, or is it a salesperson that's involved? You want to make it easy, and you want to be able for them to knock on the door and talk to people. And I'll give you an example. So at Thomas, I can say one of the goals was to sell advertising programs, positioning, site positioning, website design, all sorts of stuff to manufacturers. But their challenge was that a lot of manufacturers didn't recognize how important it was to have an internet marketing strategy. And so we said, well, let's leverage PR in a way here to educate. So we went around the country. We actually set up internet marketing workshops. And people might say, oh, PR, that's just about getting, an article. PR is also about events. It's about, how do we created this seminar, and we went around the country working with the salespeople, got people in. It was a whole, email effort to get people in, to come to it, to sign up. We conducted the seminar, the workshops, depending on where we were. That year I traveled, I would leave my house usually on a Sunday, and I would come back on Thursday. We clocked in 100 cities in a little over a year. And we did these workshops, in front of groups as small as 10 people and as big as 300. And the net result, we had the salespeople there. They were on site. We did follow-up emails, follow-up sales calls. I mean, it was a very large-scale effort where everybody was involved. It wasn't just PR. We had the marketing team. We had the research team was involved. We had the circulation team. We had the salespeople. Everybody had to be on with us. And we had a huge increase in sales because now they're knocking on that same door, and that person isn't saying, "Oh, I need to have an internet marketing strategy." They're like, "Oh yeah, I saw you, and you guys were impressive, and you did this for me, and you weren't selling me on the spot." And so sales went. It helped in two areas. One in new business, just the pure amount of new business, but also in the cycle, the sales cycle. So the original sales cycle could take anywhere from 3 to 9 months to sell somebody. All of a sudden it went down to 90 days was the max. So
Wow.
that was a huge impact on the bottom line when you looked at that. But that's an example. That was a PR campaign. And so it's looking at what your business goals are, and then what are the kinds of strategies that you can put into place to help get that exposure to make it easier for that person to sell.
And I would assume that you need to have complete buy-in on your clients, right? Meaning they have to be dedicated to this mission to make sure that it's, going through their entire organization for these efforts, I'm sure, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If you don't have buy-in from the top, it's not going to work.
Right.
It's a waste of time. And you want that buy-in because you want the spokespersons. Part of this whole process is media coaching, right? And getting the right spokespersons in for these interviews so that they can be, they're your ambassadors, right? And I worked for many people over the years who, and I had one person in particular who said to me, "I hate public speaking. I do not want to be in front of a journalist. And so these people are going to be your top people, and they're going to do a far better job than I can. And you can hold me out for something that's really critical, if you need me, but I'm telling you, I don't like it." And that was great because that person was so self-aware but had the foresight and said, "Okay, let's make these other people the ones that you're going to work with." And we did media coaching, and we worked with them to, help them in terms of the messaging and how to answer questions and how to bridge things. And, and also I think a key thing is being able to say, "I don't have the answer to that,"
Sure.
which is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know we're going to talk a little bit about PR in a crisis, but I just want to clarify for the listeners, Linda, your ideal situation is to be representing a company in good times. So before the crisis hits, it's not, it's not a cleanup type situation. So tell us just a little bit about, I don't know if you have an example to share, but a company that maybe you are or have been engaged with, kind of status quo, and then something hits.
Yeah, I've had a bunch of those. I'll give you one example that I think can really apply here is, and I'll say this was when I was with that Thomas, we had a data breach.
Oh.
And I got a call on Friday before Memorial Day weekend that we had this breach. And the first thing we did was obviously, get people together quickly. Figure out what the exposure is, what do we need to do, how do we stop it, and we talked that all through. And then we said, okay, now we really have to, and this is like within minutes.
Yeah.
We said, let's figure out who are the people that are impacted, and we have to reach out to them, and we have to let them know. We have to take ownership of it. Mm-hmm. We have to offer a solution, and then we have to do it, and then we can follow up and tell them what we did. And we did, and I'm really simplifying this, but we ended up doing a telephone effort, an email effort. It was substantial, and it was throughout the weekend into the next week. The end result was only 2 people ended up impacted, 2 companies. And we worked with them. Everything worked out fine. I'm happy to report. And we actually got people saying, "You know what, that was really good that you contacted us. Thank you. We really appreciate that." And I think the key thing on this, on any kind of crisis communications, is number one is act fast. Don't let something sit. Like you hear
Especially
that,
now.
right? The infamous is, Mark Zuckerberg, right, with Facebook, when they had their problems, and he should have responded in 15 minutes, but it was 5 days.
Mhm.
And it just makes you look bad, and it's not good. Nothing, if you don't act on it right away. The first thought obviously has to be, the company has to say, what's my exposure, right? That is critical. But it
Right.
also has to be, who am I hurting? How is what I'm doing hurting somebody or impacting them? And how do I make that right?
Right.
And if you go into it with that perspective, it'll work out. It always does. It's, I mean, you hear the infamous, in our world, the infamous is, the BP, the oil spill. Remember when that happened?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that was, I mean, what a nightmare. But that ended up getting played out in the courts. They got rigged through the coals. It was really, not a good thing. Or you hear examples of, I mean, today, and the problem with supply chain is that, supply chain wasn't even on people's radar, right? It's not on your radar unless there's a problem,
Right.
right?
Which is
Unless,
where we're at today. Yes.
exactly,
My
exactly,
mom
right?
knows about supply chain. She uses that word,
Right.
it's out there. Hmm.
I know, it's like the new meme. It's people are, and they're hearing about it in a very negative light. Like there's, the ports, what's going on in the ports today, and and how it's, ultimately the reason why we're hearing so much about it is because people they're Christmas shopping, right? And they're not going to, get your shopping done now because you may not get your products in, or you might not get, this is not getting in, or whatever it might be. And you
Consumer
miss,
level.
yeah, it's those problems mixed with pandemic and now all these new cases that are coming up. It's just it creates this crisis cluster. But I think the big mistake that companies make is not taking ownership, and not, and I say that because I remember with the BP spill, I think it was the owner, you might remember this, the owner said something like, the president of the company said, I want my life back. He said, the reporter asked him something, what are you going to do, or what would you like? And he said, I want my life back. And boy, did he get hell for that.
Oh,
For after causing all these problems, not him
Yeah.
personally, but, it's, companies like Starbucks and, I mean, even, silly things like, remember when Kentucky Fried Chicken ran out of chicken? Right? It was like, that
that's
was,
the thing now.
yeah.
Social media and everything is at our fingertips as far as
Mhm.
information goes now. So that's a great thing sometimes too. It lets smaller companies, smaller brands get recognition. But then again, it also, on the flip side, we just pulled a stat, didn't we, Linda, that said, if someone doesn't like a product, they tell up to 20 people.
Right.
So it's one of those things that good news obviously doesn't travel as fast. It does take more of a build. But then when you're saying something negative, it does go relatively quickly across social media for
That's a
sure.
great point. Yeah.
Mm.
And you work so hard, right? You work so hard to get that reputation. You work so hard to build the brand, and you can lose it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Linda, I feel like a lot of people will say, like, any press is good press. What is your opinion on that, especially in a crisis? A company that, maybe never is out there, completely underexposed, would they rather be exposed with a crisis and they get in front of it, they handle it the right way, or do you just want to stay behind the scenes?
I think if you are handling it the right, excuse me, if you're handling it the right way, and you are getting ahead of it, and you're being authentic and compassionate,
Hmm.
then I think that's good, because people will remember that, and they'll remember the good stuff. Or you hope. I mean, there will always be somebody that's going to remember the tough stuff.
Sure.
If you're not handling it in an appropriate way, no, I mean, any press that at that point is going to be bad for you. But I think people want to hear, they like it when people take ownership. It's like, even when I mean, it's simple, and these celebrities, right, who come out and say, there was, and this probably not the best example, but Reese Witherspoon was had some kind of a drinking episode or something, and she was rude, and she said, "Do you know who I am?" Blah blah blah. She got right out in front of it and said, "I behaved like an A, and I was wrong, and blah blah blah," and that was it, done.
And then she earned so much respect.
Right.
Because of
Nobody
that.
cares. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's when you don't take ownership and you double down on things and
Spin it, make it
spin
someone's
it.
fault, play the blame game.
That's great
terrible.
advice.
Exactly. Yeah. It only hurts you, in personal life as well as professional life, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I have a question, a little off topic, but I'm curious, Linda, what your point of view is in terms of really working with companies or the individuals in the companies. Which direction do you prefer to go? And I've heard that people don't care about Virgin Airlines; they care about Richard Branson. So, what is your opinion on like pulling people out of the company versus marketing the company as its own brand?
Well, I think I think it depends on the company, and I think it depends on the
Size.
person.
Mhm.
Yeah. The size of the company, the image that you want to convey, and and how important that is. At the end, and also at the end of the day, what are you measuring?
Sure.
So if Virgin is measuring, an increase in passengers, an increase in flights, or whatever it might be, how does shining a spotlight on Richard Branson help that cause?
Business.
Right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And if your business is the brand, right? That may be it. That might be fine. So if you're and the really bad example, but I'm going to say it. If you're Kim Kardashian, you want to shine the light on Kim Kardashian and all the personal, all that other stuff, because
Sure.
it helps the brand and that helps drive their sales ultimately.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I would assume that it has something to do with the leadership and how the leadership maybe perceives its people. Do their people tell the story? I think that depends on the culture. And that's just my opinion. So if you're a culture that really tries to empower people and lift others up, I think telling your people's story is a great concept. Or if you want to become a thought leader in your industry, that's a great concept. So, and what you said, Linda, on having that, it all ties into that corporate strategy and really what you're trying to do for your company, I guess that's my opinion with it.
I'm totally with you. Absolutely. Yeah. If it's about the person too much, you kind of got to question that, but if it's the person is the ambassador for the company, and they're, and it's true, when you're bringing your people up, you look better,
Sure.
and your people feel good, and it just sends this wonderful ripple effect through. And it's great when you have multiple spokespersons at a company, or voices, whether it's in a blog or whether it's in an interview or whatever it might be, because you get that full perspective, of what they're trying to do. Yeah. Yeah. And that's where the leadership really comes in, and a leader who is comfortable in her own skin to be able to say, hey, my people should talk about this, and I want my people to to all get media coached, and I want my people to feel free to do this.
That's great insight. Thank you.
So, Linda, over the past, years of your experience, I would love to hear, like, who is it that has inspired you in your life and in your career?
I was thinking about that. I've been really lucky. Over the years, I've worked with a lot of men and women who, and look, there were some women that I worked with that were not so great. As I'm sure you both have stories on that.
Both genders, yes.
Yeah.
That's another episode.
Yes.
That's another episode. Right. How to deal with toxic people.
Exactly.
But I've worked with a lot of people that were very supportive. And, when I got into, when I went to Thomas, I was 26 years old. And, I was, one of the youngest executives there. So it was, a lot of people may not have believed in me and thought, oh, she's too young to do this. But I was very fortunate, and I worked with a lot of strong men and women who were just very, supportive. I remember the chairman of the board, the president was very supportive of young blood coming in. And I was lucky. I was fortunate that way. In the same way that I've had professors, I've worked with, clients that I work with. Nicole, you're running a business. You're a role model. You're a role model to me. I love seeing women who are running businesses who care about their people and show it, and really put themselves into it. That to me is leaning in, in a way that many can't. I've also worked for people that, recreated the good old boys club because that's how she got up and that's how she climbed the ladder, and doesn't know anything else, or doesn't know any better. So I've been lucky. I've worked with lots of great people and lots of kind people, and I remember my parents always, was, the heavy work ethic. My dad used to always tell me, keep your nose to the grindstone. And I'd say, but it's getting flatter and flatter. But I remember on the flip side, my mom used to always say, the most important thing in life is to be kind and to be compassionate. And that's what you want to be. You're not going to be known for the number of days that you were in the office. You're not going to be known for the big account that you've landed. You're going to be known for what kind of person you are. And that's in and out of the corporate life.
And it affects everything. I'm in recruiting. People want to work for companies that treat them like humans and show that they have compassion. Nicole's clients want to, work with a team that cares as much about their freight as they do. So being kind and showing emotions, especially in our mail industry, I think is so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you see that also in, when we were talking about crisis situations, where executives jump in and say, hey, like during the pandemic, when the pandemic first hit, you had companies like, I'm just going to draw a blank here, but Starbucks was one of them. And there were a number of different companies that had come out and said, hey, companies that had big workforces and said, we're going to scale back and just do the drive-throughs, or we're going to do this because we want, at the end of the day, what matters is that our people are safe. And we want them to feel that way. And if you feel that way, it's kindness is often mistaken for weakness, because it's really not. Because if you do demonstrate that, and if you handle things well in a crisis situation, and you demonstrate that you care about your people more than anything else, that will come back in spades for you down the road, and morale and positive, all that good stuff. It's all part of it.
I bet those are your favorite projects to work on, when you just have to pull out good stuff that's already there and highlight it versus, having the company try and do a 180.
Exactly. And having really, people are good people are attracted to good people, as from recruiting. So when you work on a project, I don't remember the project per se. I remember the people that I worked with and the feelings, the feeling of what did we accomplish. And the best projects are one where everybody kind of gels together and everybody makes each other feel good, and you're not worried about politics and all that crap and all that, but you're lifting, like Nicole said, you're lifting each other up. Those are the things you remember.
For sure.
Yeah.
I guess we'll close with this one question, and you gave a couple hints at this, but what was the best advice you've ever gotten, and whether you took it or not?
Well, I've had lots of advice that I didn't take that I did regret. We won't talk about that. The best advice I got was the simplest, which was, do the right thing. I remember, and people that I've worked for over the years, who told me, who demonstrated that they cared about the people more than the sales. They cared more about them at the end of the day. Those were so caring more about people and showing it has really been, to me, that's the most important thing, and being authentic.
Yeah.
I think being true to your own self, I think is probably the best advice, because if you are, even if it doesn't pay off for you in a particular scenario, maybe that's not meant to be. And if you're true to yourself and do the right thing, and and be kind and try and live, a good life, you'll be good. You'll feel good about yourself, and your own intrinsic worth, self-worth will be, that's what matters, right? At the end of the
Sure.
day, that you feel good about yourself. And if you can make somebody else feel great, well, wow, that's really accomplishing something. And that's what I would say. I have a 10-year-old, and that's what I always tell her. I always say to my daughter Sally, I always say, no matter what, you've got to be kind. Even if she's like, well, so and so pushed me on the ground and blah blah blah, and I'm like, okay, but I'm not saying you have to be, be set up for that, but being kind, being authentic.
Sure. To flip that around, because I do believe in our industry that marketing and PR budgets are kind of the last ones to be justified. Everyone is so focused on the day-to-day and the logistics of the logistics. What advice do you give companies that don't have a PR budget? PR isn't something on their radar. Why should they consider it? And I guess when should they consider it in the stages of growth?
Okay. Well, they're in all stages of growth, from startup, because I work with a number of startups. So from startup to traditional, you need good PR. I would say to people that it's part of, PR is not necessarily its own separate budget. So if you're looking at it from a budget standpoint, it encompasses a number of different areas in marketing, in finance, and depending on the type of business, research, or whatever it might be. And so it doesn't have to just be one separate budget. It could be brought in from different areas. And it's really, what's the cost to you or what's the worth, not the cost. What is it worth to protect your brand? That's what I would say to somebody. What is it worth to you? And, maybe it's not worth that much to you, that you don't want to invest in this. I can't imagine somebody that would say that. And
Right.
I think it's, you have to look at the big picture with it, and look at it from the employee morale. It's internal and external. So PR is just about it's just as much about building goodwill inside as it is outside.
Yeah, and it's almost, I'm not saying that you're going to come in and solve every problem, but it's a bit of an insurance policy. If you've got, good PR, again, when times are good and then there is a crisis, that's protecting your brand and having everything in line to do so.
It does. And, it speaks volumes to the leadership, so that, good PR helps you attract good people, helps you set the stage to get new clients. It's, it calls from all these different areas.
Really does.
Yeah.
What I would say too about it is, with the stages, from my experience, when you start a company, my company is almost 5 years old. And so you start creating different narratives from different people on maybe when they entered the company or what their position is in the company, and utilizing the branding concept and the leadership involvement. It really puts it all in one package. So it's basically like me speaking my vision and my mission to my clients and my company or my employees consistently. So it's one of those where Linda's saying too, there's really no good starting point. You can start even when you're brand new and allocate something to it. So that way, as you're building and you're trying to get people on your team, or you're trying to get out to your customer concept, it's always that same packaged product, because I'm sure if you ask someone at your company, it happens to me all the time too, Charlie, where it's like, what do you do? If I go on a call with someone, they'll say something totally different than what I say. And it's almost like, hey, you totally forgot that we do X and we do Y. And so this is like the way to, for me anyways, wrap it up so it keeps that consistent branding, all the marketing efforts too. It's great.
Yeah, and people want the story.
Yes.
Exactly.
They want to follow along.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah. One of the first exercises we do is everybody, I ask different people, what does the company do? And I don't think I've ever worked someplace where somebody hasn't had multiple answers that were, it's
totally different, right?
Exactly. It's very rare that you get people to say, this is what we are and what we do.
Unless you've already come through and trained them.
Exactly. Right. You should do that after the training. Right.
Well, Linda, thank you so much for hopping on with us today and talking about this topic. Like I said, I think it's great for people to understand the fundamentals of PR all the way through what to do when you have a crisis. So appreciate your time and coming on and
Thank
sharing
you.
good insight.
So insightful. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right.